Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm Amy Abear, and I work behind the scenes on a variety of communications projects for Hyman Digital and the Ultra Wellness Center since 2017. We are so excited to dive into this topic of detoxification with you today. And judging by the hundreds of questions we've received, we know this is a topic on the minds of so many people. We will share valuable insight around what detoxification actually is and actionable tips on how you can apply effective detox modalities into your own life to live with more energy and vitality. Before we dive in, I'd like to introduce our two amazing practitioners that will be sharing their time and expertise with us today, Dr. Todd Lepine and our nutrition director, Maggie Ward. Dr. Lepine graduated from Dartmouth Medical School and is board certified in internal medicine, specializing in integrative functional medicine. He's an Institute for Functional Medicine certified practitioner. Prior to joining the Ultra Wellness Center, he worked as a physician at Canyon Ranch in Lenox, Massachusetts for 10 years. Dr. Lepine's focus at the Ultra Wellness Center is to help his patients achieve optimal health and vitality by restoring the natural balance to both the mind and body. His areas of interest include optimal aging, biodetoxification, functional gastrointestinal health, systemic inflammation, autoimmune disorders, and the neurobiology of mood and cognitive disorders. And next we have Maggie Ward. Maggie is our nutrition director at the Ultra Wellness Center. She holds a master's degree in nutrition from Bastyr University, which focuses on using whole foods and therapeutic diets for holistic nutrition therapy. In addition, she completed her requirements to become a registered dietitian at Westchester Medical Center in New York. Maggie has been counseling individuals, families, and business groups on therapeutic diets for over 20 years. Much of her focus is on food sensitivities, digestive disorders, inflammatory conditions, pediatrics, and sports nutrition. She receives ongoing clinical training through the Institute for Functional Medicine and is a faculty member of the Integrative and Functional Nutrition Academy. She helped in the development of the nutrition coaching programs for Hyman Health that provide online nutrition support to the public and provided training for nutritionists to help start the Center for Functional Medicine at the Cleveland Clinic. And I also want to read you this disclaimer. This webinar is for educational and informational purposes only and is not intended as medical advice. The information provided does not replace professional medical consultation, diagnosis, or treatment. Please consult your healthcare provider before making any changes to your health or treatment plan, as this is a discussion for the masses and not intended as medical advice for any conditions or relevant interventions discussed. And now on to the truth about detox. Dr. Lepine, detoxification is such a blanket term, especially in the wellness world these days. So, as it relates to functional medicine and the journey at the Ultra Wellness Center, can you share with us what exactly detoxification is? And a follow up to that would be who needs detoxing?
Okay, so I always like to say it's not a question, are you toxic? It's a question of how toxic are you? We all are exposed to what are called endogenous toxins, which are toxins that are actually produced in the body. And then we're also exposed to exogenous toxins, which are toxins from outside the body. And then right on the screen here is the concept in medicine called the exposome. All the different things that our body can be exposed to from things related to radiation. Stress is a toxicity, and we see that a lot today. Whether or not you deal with stress is very, very important. Lots of patients that we see oftentimes have a trigger in their health condition that is derived from stress. And then obviously lifestyle, what kind of habits do we have? Do we have good habits or do we have bad habits? All of us are creatures of habit, and we can develop bad habits without even knowing it because that's just the way that we're brought up. And then there's lots of drugs that we're exposed to. I would basically say, most pharmacologic drugs are things that as functional medicine practitioners, we use those as second line therapies. I think the risk benefit ratio of drugs is not necessarily very good for most medications. So our goal as a functional medicine providers is to keep patients off of drugs. But drugs can play a big role in how your body reacts to things and also how your body detoxifies, because some of the drugs that doctors give to patients can actually impair your body's ability to detoxify. And then we are exposed to a whole host of environmental toxins. We live in an area up in the Berkshires, up near Pittsfield, where there were PCBs that were made from General Electric years ago, and those are actually staying in the environment. You read about these things all the day, all the time in the news. The whole buzzword nowadays is microplastics. So we always tell patients to avoid cooking or storing your foods in plastics, because these small amounts of plastics can actually leach out into your body. And then there's also the concept of endotoxins. So endotoxins are the toxins that are in the body. These can happen from like lipopolysaccharides, gut bacteria in the body, and we have to detoxify those gut bacteria. So there's a lot of stuff that's going on in the body that our body naturally knows how to toxify. And some of these compounds that are out in the environment, our bodies did not evolve to know what to do with them. These forever chemicals like the PFAS chemicals and things like that. So supporting detoxification is really important. Most mainstream doctors, it's not in their radar in terms of, how to detoxify. They basically say, your body can, detoxify quite well. There are some people that are what we call good detoxifiers, and I always joke because these are the people with the George Burns genes. They have two martinis a day, a cigar in the hand, and they live to 100. My father was my father was like that. My father was a dentist. He handled mercury his whole life. He liked his martinis and he liked his cigars, and he lived to 94. And if you're a good detoxifier, that's a really good thing to have. Do you know you're a detoxifier, a good detoxifier? There's actually ways of testing for that. We actually do at the Ultra Wellness Center. We actually will test for some of the enzyme pathways that help to your body to detoxify. And then there are people who are pathological detoxifiers. These are the people that are very sensitive to supplements. They're sensitive to medications. And these are the people that are the canaries in the coal mine. And these people are in a toxic environment. And I would venture to say to some degree, and this is my own opinion, that some of these people that we see like on the autistic spectrum, they're sort of like the canaries in the coal mine, because they're being exposed to gut microbiome disruptions very early on, vaccinations, potentially heavy metals. Glyphosate is another ubiquitous toxin. In my opinion, it should be outlawed. There's lots and lots of effects with that. And so that's sort of how we approach detoxification. There is a science to detoxification. Our bodies are naturally able to do that. And the way that I conceptualize toxins and how our bodies detoxify is there's various phases of detoxification. And you can think of detoxification in the body as happening like the body takes out the garbage. And in order to take out the garbage, you've got to wrap the garbage up, and then you got to take the garbage to the curb. So it's like a stepwise process. And the
I
first
think we
part
have
of,
a good visual on that. I don't know if
oh
we can
yeah,
set that up too. That might help people
yeah,
who I'm a
right.
visual learner.
Yeah, that's a visual is always helpful. So taking out the garbage is really what we're doing, and that involves enzyme pathways in the body called the cytochrome P450 system. And that is, oh, perfect. There we go. So these cytochrome P450 systems are involved in various pathways, like they create more polar molecules, which are more readily soluble, or actually should say insoluble. And then that involves hydroxylation and reduction. And these basically create reactive species that are intermediaries. So you can think of it like creating a hot potato, and then you got to cover the hot potato. And that's the second phase, which is called conjugation. And there's a lot of exquisite biochemical reactions. A lot of us have heard about glutathione. Glutathione helps to envelop and conjugate the toxins so that they're more water soluble, so our body can get rid of them. Sulfation, which is having lots of sulfur in your diet. Maggie and I always talk about having foods that contain high sulfur, like garlic, onions, the cruciferous vegetables like broccoli, Brussels sprouts, and then also methylation, and then acetylation, and there's all these big words, but there's a lot of complex biochemistry that goes into that, and you can see on the left-hand side the various nutrients that are needed for that, things like folate, the B vitamins, lots of phytochemicals, the flavonoids that are found in foods. One of my uh, major things I tell patients to do is to eat the rainbow. The more color you have in your diet, the more phytochemicals, which feed the beneficial gut bacteria, and they also support detoxification. And then the third phase is eliminating, and that happens actually through a lot of doctors actually might be aware of the first phase and the second phase, but there's also phase three, which is getting it out through the bile, which then goes into the stool and then also through the kidneys. And then what's also not listed on here is sweating. Sweating is another way of eliminating toxins. So there's a big sort of assembly line of how your body detoxifies, and supporting this on an ongoing basis is really, really critical. So I'll finish there, and then Maggie can chime in because Maggie is my right-hand woman. When I'm ever eating bad, Maggie says, "Hey Todd, watch out for what you're eating," and she always keeps me on the straight and narrow.
I think Todd has good detox genes. Uh,
Amazing. And I absolutely love that you called that out about certain people are amazing detoxers, because it is like we look at certain family members. I feel like we all have that one certain family member that gets away with just this lifestyle that we
Yeah.
can't. It's like, well, if my grandfather did that, then I should be able to do that. And so it's amazing to know where you stand as far as, are you a good detoxifier? I think we will get into that a little bit more.
Right.
Um, and so, Maggie, what are the symptoms that you see of a high toxic burden that would signal someone needs to detox? And I know everyone needs to detox on, some level, but
but who's really, really maybe struggling more? It's a very good question. And I think almost any symptom can be connected with toxicity. We actually have everyone who comes in fill out what's called an MSQ, medical symptom questionnaire. And depending how you score on that with your symptoms, they have different areas in all the various biological systems like digestion and whatnot. You get ranked on your toxicity. So you're either optimal, mild, moderate, or severe. And we use that as a guide to really know if we're going in the right direction with people. Are they feeling better? Are we helping them detoxify, helping their gut? But some symptoms I think really do stand out when I'm working with someone. If they have neurological symptoms, I often think toxins like first and foremost. So think like Parkinson's, MS, dementia, again, people like maybe on the spectrum. Toxins often are playing a big role for those people. General fatigue and headaches and brain fog, those are very common ways that toxin or a toxin burden would present for people. Being overweight, I mean, unfortunately, it's kind of a vicious cycle because when we get overweight, we tend to carry more toxins, but unfortunately, it can make it difficult to lose weight. So when you're working with those people that are weight loss resistant, which are a lot of us, and it can be for a lot of reasons, but often toxins are playing a big role. And I would say I'd see that probably a little bit more in women. We tend to just have a higher fat percentage, which is good and normal, but we do tend to feel the impact, I think, of those toxins more. And then obviously when I'm working with someone and we go through, a really detailed diet history and exercise history, and like, are they sedentary? I mean, those are cues of how toxic they are. So if they're eating a very processed diet, they're eating, conventional wheat, that we know gets sprayed so much with glyphosate. They're not getting in the nutrients they need from whole plant foods, maybe not eating enough good, clean, quality protein. I mean, those would stand out to me like, okay, we got to work to support this person to detoxify. And again, moving, we know sedentary lifestyle is very bad for us on a lot of levels, but if you're not moving, you're often not moving out toxins too. So those are kind of the things that really stand out to me. But again, usually toxins are somewhere in that puzzle of what people are dealing with, and we have to go after them eventually.
Yeah, that you really brought some great points, Maggie. And the other thing that I like to emphasize to patients, that which is I think another key thing that most regular doctors miss. Now we have a lot of people who are taking these GLP injectable drugs, and they want to lose weight. The big thing about it is if you are losing weight, you are actually your fat is a toxic waste dump. And the more fat you have to lose, those fats get mobilized and eventually get burned. The way that we lose our fat is that we go into ketosis, where we get into the fat burning mode. Most of us are not in fat burning mode because we're eating 3 meals a day with snacks 24/7, 365 days a year. And the toxins that are in the fat are get mobilized when you're losing weight. So the big take home message is that if you are overweight and you want to lose weight, you really, really have to support your phase one, phase two, phase three, phase four detox pathways. Otherwise, you're going to get worse. And that's oftentimes when there's a healing crisis, when people are losing weight, they oftentimes will feel bad. That's because those toxins are coming out and they may not be able to get rid of their hot potatoes, and it accumulates and it causes a whole variety of different symptoms, fatigue, joint aches, brain fog, sleeping problems, you name it. It's a whole constellation of symptoms.
Right. And we kind of showed this on that diagram, but excuse me, the phase three is kind of where you need to start often with people, right? Are they moving their bowels? Are they drinking enough water and urinating? I think Dr. Levine talked about sweating. I mean, sweating is a major way to move toxins out. So you have to kind of open those up and start, before you start mobilizing these toxins, because you don't want to just keep circulating them. You need to move them out. So we do kind of start there with like the gut and making sure they're able to eliminate these toxins before we start trying to push them out.
Yeah, the other aspect, and this is something that a lot of doctors are not aware of, is that toxins, the blood from your gut goes into the liver, and then the liver in turn trans is one of the major pathways. There's a lot. The detox pathways are actually in all of the cells. Most of the cells have the cytochrome P450, but it's especially prevalent in the liver. And those toxins get stored in bile. And then we think of bile as something that allows us to digest fat. Bile is way more involved than just fat. There's primary bile acids and secondary bile acids where the bacteria act on the bile acids. And then the thing about the body is very efficient, and there's a process in the body called enterohepatic recirculation. So if you have toxins in the bile and you eat your food and the bile gets excreted with a fatty meal, if you're recycling the bile excessively, you're actually reabsorbing the toxins. So getting and binding the toxins in the bile is really important. There are various supplements and sometimes even medications that we use to support the flow of bile and then the elimination of bile in the stool. Bile is basically what gives the stool the brown color. And oftentimes we will actually ask patients, what's the color of your stool, to sort of see how you're doing that. But supporting that elimination through the bile is a really, really critical thing. I was just at a conference this past weekend with a colleague of mine who runs Quicksilver Scientific, Chris Shade, and he's an expert in the detox pathways. He has some incredible products that are, specific forms of highly absorbable liposomal glutathione, and also binders. And we use bitters a lot. Bitters are fantastic. I usually tell people, have bitters in your diet. Bitters actually work like the GLP agonists. So when you're having digestive bitters, it helps with the flow of bile. And then you want to bind the bile. Fibers can help with that. And then certain supplements and medications can also help to bind it and then push it out.
And food.
And food, yeah.
We'll talk
I
more.
love that. I love that. I'm gonna go get some bitters.
Yeah, that's what I've been doing. My mocktail during the week, I try to avoid all alcohol during the week, but in special occasions, if I go golfing and I finish the round with the guys, I'll have a beer or so. But during the week, a good thing to do is to actually add bitters to your water or seltzer water, make a mocktail, and that can just help with just digestion in general, but it also stimulates the bile flow.
I love that. Would you do that before a meal or after a meal, or does it not really matter?
You can do it both. You can do
Both.
it both. Yeah. And
Awesome.
it's very and you can there's a lot of different bitters that are out there, and you can sort of find
Yeah.
ones that you like, especially the choleretics, things like artichoke, dandelion. Those things help to stimulate the bile flow. And it's a really a quite, some people don't like the taste of bitters. These are the people that don't like, vegetables because they have a very sensitive taste to bitters. And we actually have bitter taste receptors not only on our tongue but actually in our gut. And these compounds, the GLP agonists, are actually affecting the bitter taste receptors. So including bitters as part of your diet, and a lot of vegetables have those, those bitter effects on the body.
Amazing. That is fantastic advice. Maggie, what are the different detox pathways and areas of focus? For example, and I think we might have covered this a little bit already, but lymphatic, cellular, liver, and how can we tell if our detox pathways aren't functioning optimally?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot that
Yeah, we do.
and we do tend to think kind of just liver, but again, all these organ systems are involved. And I would say, gut is really first and foremost, because I joke around with folks, like if you're not moving your bowels, if you're not pooping every day, that should be your number one goal, because nothing's going to get better until you're eliminating. So that's a big one. And again, I think sweating, I think we overlook it, and we move like metals out, we move solvents out, we move plastics out through our skin. So again, another reason for exercising, but people can get into saunas and get sweating more. And that's one of the signs I actually look for. If people are constipated, number one, again, they're probably toxic, or have a harder time removing toxins. And if they don't sweat well, we ask people that a lot, and you'd be surprised. Like some people are like, I rarely sweat. It's so hard for me to sweat, even when I exercise. I mean, I really have to work hard. And sometimes some of that is normal. Very fit people aren't going to sweat easily doing, just low level exercise. But the people we see, it's like they really struggle. And that's why I'm like, we got to slowly start getting that to move. It can come again from like a mitochondrial issue. Mitochondria are so important, in creating energy within the body and heat. So that this kind of underlying issues, but mitochondria often are not working well because there's toxins in the body.
Yeah.
So those are things that, I would look for and say, okay, we gotta get that moving, and this person's probably dealing with toxicity.
Yeah, you bring up another point. I mean, we could talk for hours on this, but the energy that's needed for detoxification requires functioning mitochondria. So mitochondria, for those who don't know about it, these are the little organelles that are inside every cell of your body except for red blood cells, and they convert food into energy, namely ATP. So detoxification is a highly energetically process, and having healthy mitochondria is really, really important. And there's a lot of things that affect our mitochondria. Statin medications, everybody's got high cholesterol. What do? You put them on a statin. What does that do? That poisons your mitochondria. And antibiotics, kids get a sniffle, they got a viral cold, they throw them on antibiotics. Our mitochondria are actually ancient phagocytized bacteria. And a lot of the antibiotics, which are in foods, if you're not eating organic foods, a lot of them contain trace amounts of antibiotics. And it's basically a slow drip poison to your mitochondria. So, having a clean diet, avoiding antibiotics unless they're absolutely necessary. Yes, we do prescribe antibiotics, but you don't want to be using them as a first line therapy because they can really affect. And I just recently had a patient who was on long-term fluoroquinolones. Fluoroquinolones now have a black box warning because they are highly toxic to the mitochondria. So yes, there's a role for antibiotics, but you want to use them only when you really have to. And fluoroquinolones, in my opinion, should only be used when it's life-threatening.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. So, Dr. Lapine, I feel like some of this we've kind of touched on already, but how do you see toxins contributing to the chronic conditions that you see and treat? And then a follow-up to that would be, do genetics play a role in someone's ability to detox?
I'm going to put my hat on here. Can you read that?
Yeah.
All right. Make America healthy again. I would venture to say that, in mainstream America, we are living in a very highly toxic environment, and people are not aware of it. Even air pollution, people that live in the cities, the nanoparticulate from diesels and gas are toxins. So we're in this toxic soup, and I have a lot of patients who actually they go on a vacation to Europe, and a lot of the stuff that we have in America is banned. Food colorings, food dyes, glyphosate, you name it, atrazine, a whole bunch of these things. And guess what? They're eating foods and they feel better. They're drinking wine and they're tolerating it because they have a cleaner environment, in my opinion, in general. Not that there's, it's a completely clean over in Europe, but they're, I think, more aware of it. And this is related to, corporations in America, trying to maximize their profits without realizing that we're all in the same fishbowl. We're all drinking the same water, we're all eating the same food, and being aware of toxins is really, really important. You don't want to be paranoid because if you go down the rabbit hole of toxins, and Maggie and I have talked to this many, many times over lunch. We're like, oh my God, the more you know, the more paranoid you become. And we don't want you to be paranoid. We want you to be aware and awake.
Absolutely. I understand that paranoia very well. And it's real. And then it's like, well, then you're going to be stressed. And then you're going to stress your system. That's the way I think about it.
Yeah.
Right. I always say we can only control what we can control. We choose our battles. We do the best we can with what we
Yep.
know and what we have access to. Because again, we're talking about that stress piece and we are not even diving into that in this kind of talk, but I mean, that's the number one toxin. So, we're always trying to lower anxiety and really just empower people. And Amy, you mentioned, the genetics. I know Dr. Lapine mentioned it too. I mean, our father, I mean, they grew up in a different time too. So in a lot of ways, it wasn't as toxic as it is now. So that's part of it. But even with our genetics, I mean, we've had a lot of people, we still do. They're like, I don't want to know my genes. And most of the genetic markers, at least the ones that we check, I mean, they can be altered or expressed, I should say, in a way that's more healthful. And that's very empowering. So, I have my own genetic SNPs that, are not what you would say are the good SNPs, but now that I know them, I can eat in a way, I can live in a way to support them and help me detoxify. And I think that's a very empowering thing. Again, knowledge is power. It's just trying again, you choose your battles and you do what you can with them. So yes, genetics are important, but there's lots of ways to support your genetics.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the type of approach that we have in at the Ultra Wellness Centers, we have what I call a proactive approach. It's personalized and it's also preventive. So the knowledge is power. So the more information that you have, the better. Megan mentioned, we don't necessarily do it in every patient, but I always equate when we look at some of the genetics, and these are not genetic diseases, but genetic variations. There are thousands of these in the body. There are certain ones which are key of key importance with supporting the body's ability to detoxify, it's like things like the glutathione transferase, quinone reductase, conjugation pathways, sulfation pathways. And when you lift the hood of the car, you can figure out what's causing the noise in your body.
Very important. And I was going to say the same thing. Knowledge is power. When you know, then you can react accordingly and change your lifestyle. So Maggie, that brings me to this question. We know that nutrition plays a huge role in detoxification. We hit on that. So do juice cleanses actually work? I think a lot of people, when they think about detox, they just automatically think, oh, I'm going to detox my body. And Dr. Lapine was saying, detoxification is actually a daily lifestyle practice. And so do juice cleanses work?
It's a good question. It's a question we get all the time. And I think, we'll get to that with some of the questions that were submitted.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't just do a detox once a year, twice a year. I mean, we should always be supporting our detox pathways because again, we live in the soup of toxins. Green juicing, the whole thing about nutrition, I mean, about detoxification, and Dr. Lapine went into it. I mean, it's an energetic process. I mean, when you look at those pathways to the liver, right, a lot of nutrition's needed. When you look at methylation, right, that's your foliage, your folate, your B12, your B6. I mean, that's coming from our vegetables, from our animal protein. You need those micronutrients to run those pathways. Sulfation, again, very important. That's Dr. Lapine mentioned your cruciferous vegetables. You can juice them, but you need quite a bit of them, and juicing kind of just adds a way to get more of that medicine. So you would say from your food. And then your antioxidants, or you probably saw them, and glutathione is an antioxidant, vitamin C, those are throughout the pathways or the phases of detox. So that's, your colorful plants again, dark pigments like berries and plums and your spices and your herbs. So when people kind of limit themselves to say just doing, fasting or juices, you're not going to get the calories you need. I mean, it's a calorically demanding process. So, and protein's really important. Like glutathione is a tripeptide. It's three different amino acids. So
Yep.
these amino acids are the backbone of all the pathways in our body, and especially detoxification. So I think green juice, again, add that on top of what you're doing. If you're, you know, want to just kind of ramp up your detox pathways, every once in a while, just to get a little more support. You take a break from your, caffeine and alcohol and those things that, unfortunately are making us a little more toxic, and add that in. That's great. But you should always be eating enough food, getting enough protein, getting enough plants in your diet to make sure these detox pathways are working, and you're getting fiber. We're talking about, the whole importance of bile. Once all that stuff comes from the liver and the gallbladder and gets dumped into the gut, you got to poop it out. And you do that by eating fiber, binding that up and moving it through the bowel. So, when you juice and you remove all that fiber, if you're not eating the whole foods as well, you're going to miss out on that fiber. And that's super, super important.
You said it very, very well, Maggie. The other thing, a lot of people have heard about glutathione, and glutathione is one of many different ways in which we detoxify. And I would say glutathione is probably one of the major antioxidants in the body that supports detoxification. And the interesting thing about glutathione, and I learned this through Jeffrey Bland, who's a godfather of functional medicine, is I remember him emphasizing years ago the importance of glycine. So for people that don't know, haven't heard about glycine, glycine is a conditionally essential amino acid. So in our bodies, we have essential amino acids. So if you're a strict vegan or you're not getting enough protein, you may not be able to make glutathione. And under certain conditions, your body needs more glutathione. So when you're having excess toxins, excess oxidative stress, you need higher levels of glycine, because glycine is one of the building block amino acids in the synthesis of glutathione. So we need cysteine, glycine, and glutamine. And those three amino acids allow us to synthesize and put together glutathione. And under certain circumstances, we need higher levels of glycine. So glycine is something that I use a lot in patients, because oftentimes when we do testing, we can see that a patient is low in their glycine. We can also see that they're having a higher demand for glutathione. So that's something that is probably a low-hanging fruit that and patients can do that. Interestingly, if you take glycine as a conditionally essential amino acid, if you take it at nighttime, it actually helps to support sleep. There's some really good studies on that in the literature. 3 grams of glycine at nighttime prevents people from waking up in the middle of the night, in addition to supporting detox.
That is amazing information. I'm plant-based, and I've never heard someone connect glutathione with, when you're plant-based, that you're not making it, which
Yeah,
makes
I mean, this is, the other thing about, I have a lot of patients who come into me and they're either vegetarians or vegans. And the first thing I ask them is, why are you a vegan? Why are you a vegetarian? Sometimes it's for, ethical reasons. Sometimes it's for environmental reasons. Sometimes for religious reasons. Sometimes just because they think that, oh, that's a better way for us to go. I come from a family of dentists, and you see that tooth right there? That's a canine tooth. And
that's what my stepdad says, the same thing. He goes,
yeah,
we have
right,
these teeth.
right. There's a canine tooth, and canine teeth are actually designed to tear animal protein, so fish, animal meats, etc. And we are literally omnivores. So you can be a vegetarian or a vegan and be healthy, but you damn well better know how to do it. And you better work with someone like Maggie, because a lot of people do it thinking, oh, I'm going to be healthy. And some of the sickest people that we see are uneducated vegetarians and vegans. So you can be smoking a cigar, eating Twinkies, drinking Coca-Cola, and you're a vegetarian. So
Oh,
it's just
100%.
just because you're a vegetarian does not mean you're going to be healthy. So you got to do it the right way.
Absolutely. I actually wrote a post on this because I want to disclaim that, though, and it's on the Ultra Wellness Center website. And I want to make a disclaimer that I am in full support of eating healthy organic meat.
Right.
Even though I'm personally plant-based, I
Right.
definitely am an
And you
advocate.
just, and again, it's, I always tell, people that,
Personal.
because there's all these, different diets, the pescatarian, the vegetarian, the carnivore, you name it, all these different diets are out there, and there's no one diet that fits all. But, we're not if you do have animal protein, you don't want too much. Like, if you had to go out and hunt and kill and drag back your animals, you wouldn't be eating as much protein as we do today. But that being said, animal protein is a great source for a lot of different, vitamins, minerals, and essential amino acids. So it is easier to get that when you're eating animals, but again, they have to be clean animals and not too much, not too
Yeah, I
often.
was going to jump in and say quality, 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 especially, I mean, we focus on organic with a lot of our plants, and some of that's very important because they do get, some of them get sprayed heavily, but the further you eat up the food chain, right, you're also making those toxins more concentrated. So what I tell people, like if you can afford better quality meat, that's where you want to spend your money. And we don't need 16-ounce steaks. We're talking about like a condiment to the meal, a few ounces on top of like some of the protein you're going to get from nuts and seeds and beans and some of the plant protein as well. But so I think when we eat it in appropriate portions and we get really good quality, pastured raised cows are a completely different food on so many levels, including environmental, which is super important,
Yep.
than a factory corn-fed cow. So that I think is really an important distinction to make. And I think when people are, plant-based, it's for a lot of good reasons, and I want to honor all those reasons. But a lots of times, even short term, if they need it for their health, I think if they can get good quality, they find peace with that and they're able to do it short term and then often go back to a mostly plant-based diet.
Yep.
100% quality over quantity.
Yep.
Definitely. Okay, so we'll do one more question and then we're going to move to some of our audience questions that were pre-submitted, and then we're going to take some questions at the end. So, Maggie, what would be your top nutrition tip for someone who might be out there watching? I mean, this is a broad topic. As Dr. Lapine was explaining, there's so much that goes into it. But what would your top nutrition tip be for someone who might be out there knowing they need to eliminate toxins, but not sure where to start?
Yeah, it's so hard to pick a top one. I would say again, moving from processed food over to whole food, right? Getting away from the anything sugar based, and that includes, refined grain based flour. I mean, we can sometimes get breads and things that are more ground up seeds and nuts, but it's the grain that, gets removed of all the fiber and the nutrients, and then you're really left with simple sugars. So moving away from that and moving over to more whole plants, colorful plants, again, good quality animal protein that we were just talking about, not the processed stuff, as much as you can. Again, you choose your battles, but just that shift, I mean, that is the foundation we all should be kind of establishing and living off of. Obviously, I have to mention good hydration. I have a lot of people coming in, we're talking food, 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 and then I touch on water and they're like, huh, I
I never
drink
drink it.
2 glasses a day, or I just drink coffee and tea. I'm like, those don't really count, unfortunately, at least not, black and green teas. So really good hydration. Obviously, again, those kidneys, right? Moving those bowels. A lot of people are constipated because they're just not drinking enough water.
And not
Um,
moving. Yeah, not
yeah,
moving.
so that's like, that goes kind of hand in hand. Um, get out, be in nature. Like Dr. Lupine said, I mean, it's about 9 million people die every year from pollution. Like we're talking about making America, making the world healthy again. Like we have to work to clean up our air and everything, and getting in nature and protecting nature is probably top of the list of doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's where I would start.
Yeah. And just to chime in and to add to that,
Yeah, Todd, because
Michael,
that's the next question is what would your one
I mean,
obviously it's not one.
I like the mantra of Michael Pollan. He's written multiple books, including The Omnivore's Dilemma, and he goes, eat real food. And when I say real food, it's not like fake food, not processed food, not Franken food, GMO food. So he goes, eat food, not too much, mostly plants. That's sort of like the sort of a good way of thinking about it. So having a plant-based diet, making sure it's real food that you're eating, not this highly processed food. There's actually, I think, a book out now called Ultra Processed Humans. And this processed food is killing. And Maggie and I have joked about that because when I go into a standard supermarket, grocery store, I basically, in my mind, I'm saying everybody's being slowly poisoned. Literally, everybody is being slowly poisoned. It's that real.
Stop on the edges.
Yeah.
Don't go in the aisles. Stop on the edges.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Perimeters, the perimeters, that's where it's at, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, great. So let's get into some of these audience questions. These were pre-submitted, so thank you so much. Again, we had hundreds of them, and the way we can do this is a little bit of a rapid fire, I suppose. But
Fire
so all right. So Maggie, what does it mean to open your detox pathways? And they asked, do they have to prep for a detox in some way?
Good question. I think this goes back to thinking about like, more of these intense juice cleanses and things like that, which again, we wouldn't really recommend doing on their own. There's a place for fasting and that can be helpful, but the number one thing we do is work on the gut. How we approach treating people in functional medicine is there's layers, and the gut is always the first layer. Because again, if that doesn't get healthy, you're not going to get inflammation to come down and you're not going to be able to eliminate toxins. So opening pathways is really, I think, getting the gut moving, supporting the liver so it can push things into the gut, the bile. So it's pooping, hydrating, eating enough fiber, all those things that we were kind of talking about. So you really want to do that first before you kind of start taking any additional maybe supplements that have been recommended to support detox and things like that, because you don't want to get mobilized toxins if you can't move them out.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this next question, Maggie and Todd, jump in if you would like to, but how do you best support a sluggish methylation due to the MTHR and COMT SNPS?
Yeah, that's
I'm probably not even
MTHFR.
saying them right.
Those are two very common and well-known genetic SNPs for people that maybe that have checked their genetics, and a lot of research behind them, very impactful genes. But again, very easy to alter in a way that express it more healthfully. So MTHFR and COMT are both in methylation pathways. You really, again, a lot of it's food. I mean, we're talking about, supplements, but folate is super important for methylation pathways. So your dark green leafy vegetables are great sources of folate. Often we will give some supplemental folate and B vitamins as well to give people a little additional support, especially if they're not used to eating many vegetables. And then the COMT, again, it's catecholamine methyltransferase. It's a pathway in which we move out our stress hormones, our cortisol and our adrenaline. And that goes back to, I mean, we could have a whole talk, and we should have a whole talk on how to de-stress, our emotional toxins, our mental toxins, getting out toxic relationships and toxic jobs. I mean, all of that
Yeah.
creates more cortisol and adrenaline. And some of us I'm one of them. I have a double mutation in my COMT. I make a point every day to meditate, get in nature, move. If I don't, I'd have probably not be as healthy as I am. So it's probably stress reduction is first and foremost for COMT. It's also a major pathway to move estrogen out, break down estrogen.
Yep.
Nutritionally, what I think of is actually ground flax seeds. They're very rich in a compound called lignans, and that's very good at degrading and moving estrogen out, and great source of fiber again. So that would be like a go-to food for COMT.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And then the other aspect of how our bodies detoxify. I mean, men have estrogen and testosterone, just that women have more estrogen than men. And one of the things that's involved in one of the risk factors for breast cancer is what's called a 4-hydroxyestrogen. So, and that's involved in what's called a quinone reductase pathway in the body. And we can actually measure that. So when we look at hormones, we don't just look at your levels of your hormones. We look at how your body's detoxifying your hormones.
Right.
And oftentimes when we see patients who have high 4-hydroxyestrogen, that quinone reductase is like a hot potato. That's sort of the way to think about it. And you've got to cool down that hot potato. And having high levels of that, there are different things that you can do to support and decrease the what are called the quinone adducts, because those hot potatoes actually damage DNA, which is tied in strongly with some women's risk for breast cancer. Also, clinically, if someone has a history of panic attacks, till proven otherwise, they're a COMT homozygous. They're the ones who, when they get the stress hormones, they can't get the stress hormones out of their body. They stay in their body longer. The same thing with all the other catecholamines and also estrogen, because estrogen is part of the catecholamine or the catechol pathways.
I want to address this question to you, Dr. Lapine. What parameters should, this is a total, little bit of a segue, but what parameters should someone use to choose a red light sauna for detoxification, and parameters around a red light facial mask? Or do you even recommend a red light
Yeah, I
facial?
mean, that's an interesting topic unto itself. So red light therapy is basically energy therapy, and there's actually very good evidence that the red light therapy is doing its primary thing by working on activating mitochondria. So when you get the red light, which is a certain frequency, it's actually stimulating mitochondria. We talked about the importance of mitochondria because those are how your body moves your muscles, how you think, how you digest. So any way that you can support mitochondria is going to be really important. They tend to be expensive. I don't necessarily recommend them for every patient. They also can be used like infrared saunas and far infrared, near infrared saunas to raise your body temperature to facilitate sweating. Some people, that's one way to sort of get them to start sweating is to use like a infrared sauna to facilitate that. But it's also in addition to the sweating aspect, what it's really doing is it's also helping with mitochondria. And there's some actually fascinating work on using red light therapy for neurodegenerative conditions. So things like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, they're actually applying the infrared light therapy to the brain itself to activate the mitochondria in the brain because your mitochondria are really, really important. As we get older, things slow down, especially your mitochondria. Exercise is one of the big things that helps with mitochondria. It boosts the size of your mitochondria, it boosts the enzymes in your mitochondria, and it boosts the number of your mitochondria. So get out there and move your butt.
Amazing. Maggie, this person says, I'm underweight. Will detoxing affect my health and bones negatively? And then I want to just add another question is, can detox help your LDL, which is a little bit different topic.
Bones and LDL. Okay. Again, like if you're eating enough, no, I mean, if you're underweight, yes, it's higher risk for osteoporosis. But you should be eating in a way that you're getting enough calories, again, getting enough protein. I didn't really go into quality fat, but that's also very important too. Our anti-inflammatory fats are monounsaturated fats like avocado and olives and our, raw seeds and nuts. So if you're getting enough calories, you're getting enough protein, it should be fine and actually good for someone, I would think, who's underweight. I just wouldn't do any extensive fasting or again, obviously not the green juices. Yeah, and again, you need enough nutrition. I mean, sometimes people are losing bone because they're not getting enough minerals, like calcium and magnesium and things like that. So if you're bringing in a lot of plants and micronutrient-rich foods, I mean, that should be helping to protect your bones as well. So yes, I think overall it is safe for someone who's underweight and should help. LDL, I didn't answer the LDL. Yeah, fiber, I mean, cholesterol, we eat it, but we make it in our liver. A lot of that gets, we're talking about hepatic circulation. I mean, gets dumped into the digestive tract and gets reabsorbed. So when you're eating, and everyone should be eating a plant forward diet, right? Half your plate, even if you're eating protein, animal protein, which we recommend, I mean, half the plate we recommend vegetables, and your nuts and your seeds, and again, avocados, these are all excellent sources of fiber. So when you're eating that, you're binding up some of your cholesterol and it should, lower that LDL. You're going to improve your blood sugar. That has an influence a lot on the balance of your HDL and your LDL, particle size, with a lot of other levels of assessing cardiovascular health and improving cardiovascular health.
Yeah, I can't help but chime in here, Maggie, because
Right.
when people talk about, you go to a cocktail party and people are talking about their cholesterol, I'm just going to tell people this. Heart disease is really driven by inflammation, not cholesterol.
Right.
Cholesterol is a good molecule. There are different subfractions of cholesterol. We do testing for subfractions. We check the size of the LDL particles, the HDL particles. And just because you have a high LDL does not mean you need to treat it. And I will really emphasize this because if you have what's called primary prevention, meaning that you don't have any cardiovascular risk factors except just an elevated LDL cholesterol, you've got to treat 500 people with statins for a number of years to prevent one heart attack, which means 499 people do not benefit by taking a statin medication. Now, there are roles for statin medication. If somebody has a known heart disease, when you take a statin, Statins are actually not working by lowering cholesterol. They're what are called pleiotropic effects. And what the statins actually do in preventing second heart attacks is they calcify the plaques in the body. So the hard plaques are the ones that are stable. The soft plaques are not. So taking statins actually sort of seal over the atherosclerotic plaques and make them more stable so they don't break off and cause a heart attack. Lots of people with high cholesterol never get heart disease. Lots of people with normal cholesterol get heart disease. Heart disease is more about inflammation. We actually do panels that look at a variety of cardiovascular inflammatory markers to see whether or not they're at higher risk because of the inflammation in the body. And then there's another paper that I reference a lot, is that when you look at centenarians, the people who live to over 100, guess what's strongly associated with longevity? Higher cholesterol.
Wow.
Cholesterol is the building block of all of your cellular membranes. It's the building block of all of your hormones. So cholesterol is not a bad molecule. I love cholesterol. Now, when you have too much cholesterol with inflammation and its other factors, then yeah, that's an issue. But don't worry about your cholesterol.
Thank you, Dr. Lapine. And we have so many questions that, just so everyone knows, we will work to get these answered in the future somehow. But I will ask one more question, Dr. Lapine. I know that you need to hop off soon. Is there any way to remove glyphosate from the body?
Yes, try to eat organic as much as possible. And then the amino acid, which I mentioned before, there's some really good work. If you really want to go down the rabbit hole of glyphosate, just Google Stephanie Seneff. She's an MIT scientist, and she's written a lot, talked a lot, wrote a lot. Glycine is another way of actually removing glyphosate from the body. Glyphosate is actually relatively short-lived, so you get it in your body can eliminate it, but glycine will actually help to facilitate the removal of, or glycine will help facilitate the removal of glyphosate in the body. So that's one thing that you can do.
Thank you so much. So important. And Maggie, how do we get rid of PFAs in the body? And PFAs coming from plastics is my
Yeah,
understanding.
their PFAs come from a lot of places. They're the per polyfluorinated compounds. They are more persistent. So that's the one of the problems with these persistent pollutants is that they're going to build up over time, right? Because unfortunately, again, we're getting exposure everywhere. So it's in cookware, plastics. You get it in dust from industrial different operations. It's in our water. Unfortunately, there's, again, we're talking about PCBs here in the Housatonic and in beautiful Berkshires, but PFAS is in the Hoosick River, which is next door. So it's a real problem. There is fiber again. There's actually research showing like high fiber diets, does bind on and help eliminate PFAS in the body. Other binders, I mean, there's something called cholestyramine. This goes back to kind of the gallbladder and bile and moving toxins out, but cholestyramine binds up to bile and things and can really eliminate a lot of toxins. And I think there is some good research showing cholestyramine being helpful moving out PFAS. And then again, you can't avoid this stuff completely, but you can minimize it. So I'm really about, like, I think the biggest exposure is like these plastic containers, like, so eating out, takeout, you really want to minimize that. I embarrass my daughter when we go out to eat. I bring my own like Pyrex glass. So if they're leftovers, I'm like, do not put that in plastic. One, I don't want it in the environment, but I don't want it, in me
Yeah.
either. So using glass and ceramic for cooking, stainless steel obviously is great, our pots and pans. Cast iron's a good option for most people. And trying to clean it out of water. Carbon filters, I think I saw a question coming in just now about filters. Reverse osmosis obviously is wonderful. It's going to remove everything, but it will also remove minerals. It's also fairly expensive and it unfortunately wastes a lot of water. So I tend to go more with the carbon filters for a lot of people. And there's like these compact carbon filters that are great. I think a lot of what's in the Pure and the Britas. I have one called Life Straw. I use it because it's a glass container. It's just on my countertop. But it's a very good compact carbon filter, and that's supposed to remove a lot of PFAS.
Yeah.
Air filters. Every office in this building, we have an air doctor. Not that, that's the only one, but, trying to get your air clean, especially if you live in a city where there is more air pollution, you don't have a lot of trees around. I mean, I would try to get an air filter. There's forest fires everywhere, unfortunately, now. We were shipping air filters out to people we knew in California with the recent fires. So, if you can filter your air a little bit better, that can make a difference too for PFAS.
Yeah, I agree with that. I have a carbon filter for the water in my house, and interestingly, as a physician, I used to work and cover the emergency room. And if somebody came in with a drug overdose, guess what we would use? We would use
Oh, sorry.
charcoal.
Oh, charcoal, yeah.
Charcoal is a great binder, and there's some really
Yep.
interesting evidence that periodically taking some activated charcoal is potentially very, very helpful for the body because it helps to bind and eliminate waste.
Including those endotoxins that Dr. Payne was talking,
Absolutely. Yes, exactly. Yep.
right? We try to move out these kind of bad bacteria or overgrowth really of bacteria, and you can get those toxin release. So we use charcoal with a lot of people to help them move
Yep.
those toxins out.
Yeah. That's
Actually, a
great.
question.
Absolutely, Maggie. So this has been a lot of fun. This has been great.
Amazing. So I'm gonna see. Let's see. Do we have time for one more question?
I could stay on, Dr. Lupine, if you got to jump off, do so when you need to, but
Yep.
I'm happy to answer something if I can.
Anything I could ask Dr. Lapine? Maybe one more question. Okay. Do neurodivergent kids and adults have a harder time detoxifying?
I would say possibly, not everybody. Neurodivergent is this whole spectrum, so it's not one thing. I would, my how I explain, autism and autism spectrum, which we also know we call neurodivergent, is that in genetically susceptible individuals, these people are exposed to a host of environmental toxins during critical times of neuroimmunological development, which then clinically present as autistic spectrum. I'll sort of leave it at that. That's how I wrap my head around autism. There is no one thing about autism, and you can't treat autism with one drug or one supplement or one food. It's a whole host of things. It's very complex. We're seeing more and more of it. And in my opinion, that is a sign that we are living in a toxic world because they're basically the canaries in the coal mine.
Well, thank you so much. I think maybe we're going to wrap up.
Maybe we'll eventually do a part two.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
so much, and we've shared, you have shared amazing information today. And I just want to let everyone know that we have a guide, a detoxification guide. So if we didn't get to your questions today, you may find your answer there. That's free to download. And if you'd like to find out more about booking a functional medicine or nutrition consultation, you can sign up for a free intro session, and that link will be in our chat. And again, I know there were so many questions. Maybe we will do a detox, truth about detox part 2. I think that would be something to consider for us for sure. So I thank everyone. Thank you so much for your time, Dr. Lapine and Maggie. This was awesome. I learned a lot. I'm excited to rewatch this and apply some of this. Like I said, I'm going to get some bitters today.
Great. That's a
Well,
great place to start.
yeah. Well, thanks a lot,
Thank you,
Amy. Thanks,
Amy.
Maggie. I've got to run, and
Thank you.
everybody remember to get outside, get some fresh air, sunshine, hug a tree, and run.
Thank you so
All
much.
right. Take care.
Sounds good.
Bye-bye.
Dr. Lapine.